Hello, welcome to BWI Live. We've got a great show for you today because, well, we always have a great show, but we have the experts in Penn State football recruiting, the two people who know more than just about anybody other than the coaching staff or the recruiting staff who have all of the answers. These guys, your next best option, Ryan Snyder and Sean Fitz of Blue White Illustrated. Gentlemen, excited for another show today. I know we've got football coming up this weekend on the high school and the college level, so we'll be talking about that. And, of course, everyone's favorite topic, quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, skill players, all that coming up on the show today. So, Fitz, off the top, what's on your mind today?
Well, I got a hoodie on. It's 62 degrees in State College. It feels like football. It's pretty great. I'm not going to lie. Just took the dogs for a long walk, and it's nice to have the long sleeves up. Ryan's got it too. So that's what's on my mind. Appreciate the little break. I had to step away for a couple days, but no, the staff here at Blue White, you didn't even notice I was gone because they're so good. So thanks to Ryan, T. Frank, of course, Greg, and Nate. Subscribe because it's not only good coverage, good people as well. So definitely check us out.
Glad to have you back. Ryan, what's going on with you this week? What are you writing about? What are you thinking about at Blue White Illustrated?
Oh, I mean, who cares about that when your kids are back in school after being home all summer? Let's go. That's the best news of the week. They just started class. My oldest started class yesterday, so we're on cloud nine over here. Mom and dad are getting more work done than we have all summer, it feels like, which is nice. But no, high school football, man, that's everything this week. We'll get into some of the key games here a little later in the show, but just excited to have some football to talk about. Some, whether it's recruiting news, I don't know, but just being able to go out and watch guys and see how they're progressing and all those kind of things. I'm excited for that this weekend.
As always, if you want to get the most out of Blue White Illustrated, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated. It's 2 months for $1. You get access to all kinds of great information from these guys in recruiting, probably why you're here watching this show, or Penn State football, which is coming up. We've got previews, we've got film breakdowns, we've got insider information. Camp broke, so we've got guys that are working on information that you need to know for the upcoming week. Code PSU1, 2 months for $1, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And, of course, if you're watching this show, please like the video. Subscribe here to the YouTube channel. Fastest growing Penn State football YouTube channel out there, biggest YouTube channel out there covering Penn State football. And I've been saying this, guys. This is the largest talk show that discusses Penn State football and Penn State football recruiting anywhere, because we're the people that do it. Like, this is the source of your information. And one of those things that we've discussed recently, Penn State offering a JUCO player. Fitz, is this from a familiar location out west? Is this the same place I'm thinking of that they've offered guys previously?
Yes, College of San Mateo. Not a ton of guys, but Sion Lalea was a big target last year. Penn State should have landed him. There were issues on the back end in terms of academics. He would have come to Penn State, or he would have committed to Penn State, eventually landed at Oregon. And he was pretty well in. I mean, that guy loved Terry Smith. But Northern California, junior college ball, a little bit different everywhere you go in the country. We're so used to Lackawanna here in Pennsylvania, and that's been good to Penn State over the years, but you're still looking all over the place, and junior college ball has changed with the portal, and it's been really interesting to watch this in the last couple of years, because it's dipped, but you still get the same top level guys that a bunch of schools go after at premium positions, at all positions really. So Penn State's going to keep their eye on there, and they've got a decent relationship based on the Lalea recruitment, and they went out and they offered Odera Okaka this week. I hope I said that right, but he's a guy, full qualifier out of high school in California, was committed to Southern Utah, and he's one of those guys. I mean, this is a traditional like JUCO blow up type guy. Like I said, committed to Southern Utah, never made it, went to College of San Mateo, had a productive year as a linebacker edge, kind of a stand-up defensive end / linebacker last year as a freshman. Was one of the standouts on a very good defense that won a Northern California JUCO title. Listed anywhere between 6'3", 210 and 6'4", 245. Would like to get a more accurate measurement on him, but don't look too deep into this one. This would be a 1-for-1 replacement for Jameel Lyons. It's same eligibility. He'll be a sophomore this year. Lyons, of course, was going to be a sophomore this year, so he'll have 3 to play 2 when he enrolls somewhere in January. Told me he's very interested in terms of how Penn State has put out edge rushers. Stop me if you've heard that one before. But that's what we're looking at here with Penn State's latest junior college offer. It's going to be very interesting. He's a preseason All-American at the junior college level. Everybody needs pass rushers. We're going to see where this one goes, because when Penn State goes across the country to offer a junior college kid, people take notice. I know Boise State had offered. There's a couple other good ones in there. And Cal just came with an offer after Penn State. But I think this is a guy that's really put himself in position. If you just watch the highlights, he wreaks havoc there. And I know it's so tough to figure out junior college, how it's going to translate. But havoc does translate a lot of times. So very curious to see how this one goes, whether more schools, especially out west, will get involved. And we'll see if he makes for an official visit, because this is a 2025 prospect. There's not a ton of 2025s out there. So for Penn State to offer a 2025 prospect, whether it be high school, whether it be JUCO, kind of opens some eyes at this point in the season. Alan Zamitis was the one that delivered the news. Okaka said he was going to talk to Dion Barnes a little bit later. So be very interested to see where this one goes, because that's a premium position.
Yeah.
Feel that?
And of course.
What's that?
Sorry. I was just going to say, and of course, with Max Granville moving up a year and committing early, provides a little more room in that pass rusher room. As you mentioned, 2025 eligibility, but just kind of the numbers and the way they've worked out in that area. It's not, you would say, like, for if it was this upcoming class, another edge rusher, but as you pointed out, there are some differences between him and some of the other guys in this committed class.
And Abdul's draft eligible, Denai's draft eligible, Amin's draft eligible, Smith Vilbert is draft eligible twice, I think. So you've got the opportunity for that room to open up pretty quickly, which is why getting Max Granville on campus so early is a big deal. I'm very curious to see which direction they go. We know they're going to look in the portal for defensive linemen at both spots, and I think this is another way around it.
The only thing, just watching here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, arm length looks like it's okay, but everything else I think looks like he's got a good frame and all those things. So obviously, if Penn State's offering him, they see enough traits on film, and they probably want to get a closer look at some of these things about him. Just some observations from that perspective. Ryan, do you have any thoughts here on the situation or Penn State's general situation at edge rusher, as we just kind of laid out there?
Just seeing where things go, right? Obviously, with like Sean said, when Penn State's offering a player like that, it's going to grab a lot of attention. And I think a lot of schools will probably have an eye on him over the coming weeks and months. So just curious to see if he's able to make it out for a visit. But he had 41 tackles last year, 3 sacks. Looks to move pretty well. I would assume he's closer to that 235, 240. I think that number we have, I assume, is probably from back when he was in high school, which, by the way, he went to Pittsburgh, which I believe, did he play with Jaden Rashada? I would assume he did, because that was the same school as Rashada back in the day. I only remember that because Rashada visited, and remember there was a time period where we thought maybe he would end up at Penn State, and of course then everything else changed. But yeah, just curious to see how this one goes, and whether he's able to make it for a visit. That's the big thing. Coming across the country, he's going to play a lot on Saturdays. Where does that go? This feels like a recruitment that'll probably end up dragging out till November, December.
Ryan, wait, you just stumbled on a game here. Let's play alternate timeline with Jaden Rashada. No. Because yes, let's do it. No. You were in on that one. And I don't think people realize how interested he was and how the staff handled it. So how does that one play out if Mike Yursich gives him the go-ahead?
I think he commits and then decommits.
Right.
Is that fair? I mean, that's because he wanted to commit. I mean, I don't know how much we've talked about that, I believe. But I mean, he wanted to commit at one point, I believe. That was, how many years ago was that? What was your shot? 2023? 20, so that was
2023 class, yeah.
Yeah. So probably, 2022-ish, maybe late 2021, probably 2022. Yeah, I mean, he was very interested in Penn State, and just watching how that all played out in Florida. Of course, now he's at Georgia. I don't know, was he committed to Arizona State or something like that at one point too? It was all over the place. But yeah, that was right. He transferred to Arizona State.
Then went to Arizona State and then transferred to Georgia. So, but
interesting recruitment to follow. I'm happy we did not have to follow that one.
I agree with that. Yeah, because even if he did commit, that one wasn't sticking. So, yeah.
So today's show, as always, is brought to you by My Perfect Franchise. I always appreciate Andy Ludicky for supporting this show. And if you want to know more about My Perfect Franchise, just talk to him. Andy at My Perfect Franchise, 404-973-9901, or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Listen, I'm not here. I don't know a whole lot about business, but he's told me a whole lot about business and what's hot in certain sectors, and men's health is super hot right now, and business trends like home services, health health and beauty, all these things. Coming from me doesn't mean anything because I don't really have the context behind it, but I do know that Andy can provide you with a bunch of different ways to change your life. And what does that mean? Well, on the American dream, financial freedom, the ability to determine your own future, is kind of determined by how much money you make and if you can set your own schedule. And if you're your own boss and you own a company, that's much easier than if you're in corporate management and you're making money for other people. That's kind of what this comes down to. Make money for yourself, whether the business economy is booming or if there's a downturn in the economy. There's always something that is moving, and Andy has his pulse on all of that. He can help you with any type of business ownership in a franchise world or with a small business now. So if you have an idea of what you want to do with the next step in your life, check him out, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Appreciate him for being a part of the show. And of course, welcome our new sponsor for the 2024 season, Game Time. You want to go to a game? Check out the Game Time app. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can get tickets. But if you want to get tickets that show you your seat, are affordable, and can give you a little bit of a deal on the side, Game Time. That's where we're going for our tickets this year. Appreciate them being here. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with the Game Time app. And there's a special promo code if you join. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code ON3 for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Is Game Time. Appreciate our sponsors today. The next thing we're going to be talking about is 2027. You know, everyone wants to know about what's going to happen with the class 2 years out, but here's why. On3 rankings came out recently, the initial On3 rankings for that class, and they're pretty impressive from where Penn State is sitting. So, Ron, I'm going to throw this to you because you usually chronicle these things for Penn State fans over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. What was the takeaway for you with this particular class?
Lots. We got to start with Keemon Spell, right? Not only is he the number one player in Pennsylvania, he's the number one running back in the entire country to start it out, and number 7 in the entire country at all positions, which obviously would make him a 5-star depending on whether he stays that high and how things shuffle. Which, let me clarify right now, a lot will shuffle with this list. Lots going to shuffle with 2026 still in the coming months. But I think that certainly grabbed my eye. I thought he would be certainly a 4-star prospect. If you had even told me he's a top 100 guy, I could buy that, just from watching him at camp. Obviously, the highlights are really, really impressive. But man, number 7 in the entire country, that stood out to me. That impressed me. And look, I know the guys locally. I don't know the running back scene in Texas and Florida and all over the place, especially for sophomores. So that's why we let Charles Power and Cody Belair and all of our scouts kind of really overlook that stuff. So I was a little surprised to see him that high, but at the same time, those guys know the national scene, especially for guys who just now are starting their sophomore years, way better than I do. So that really grabbed my attention. Man, it seems like a heck of a pickup for Penn State. That if all goes to plan, right, and Ty Key signs and Jabri Wallace-Coleman signs, and of course Keemon down the road, Penn State would have landed the number 1 running back in the state 6 years in a row. Of course, London Montgomery has since transferred out, but going back to Nick Singleton and of course. Who
Messiah Mickens.
Yes, Mickens, and you have Quentin Martin in there, although we have Quentin listed as an athlete, but I certainly would count him as a running back. So really impressive run there. I mean, obviously state recruiting recently has been a hot topic, but if there's one position that they are not struggling with at all in Pennsylvania, it is running back. So really excited to watch Spell this year and see how he does. McKeesport runs a wing T, so he's going to split a lot of carries with Anthony Boyd. He's a Division II prospect going to Cal U. So just kind of curious to see how he's able to progress as a player this year. But really impressive kid. Had a good talk with him the other day, and really excited to see his growth.
One of the things I find interesting, you mentioned if he's able to stay in the top 32 players in the nation, very hard to do for a running back, Ryan. I think that's the part we kind of talk about with Quentin Martin. We mentioned this as well. As the class develops and as our national scouts find quarterbacks, edge rushers, receivers, that kind of bubble to the surface, Keemon Spell could be one of the top 32 players, but positionally, that might ding him a little bit. Fitz, do you think that's material information? Is that important at this point? And how important, I guess, is it to have an elite player in the class of 2027, knowing that, it is so far out? Is this anything they can use to build kind of momentum like they have in 2026?
Yes. There's a couple layers here, as there always is. So number one, getting a 2027 commit in the running back room gives you had flexibility before, but in the 2026 room, you're going to take a second one probably, but there's no real impotence to take any guy that isn't well above that line,
Right.
So they're going to continue to watch guys. They're going to continue to go after guys. Messiah is great. Keemon Spell is great. So it gives you the opportunity to sort of flesh that out, do your right evaluations, and then hopefully not end up with a situation like they've ended up in 2025 where, Barker was on early and now he's not in the class. So I think eventually things will float to the top there. From a rankings perspective, probably the high water mark for him. I mean, it's number 7 as a running back. The number 1 running back in 2025 right now is 20th overall in the On3 industry rankings. It's just the nature of the position. You go to 38 and then that's it for the top 50. So it's the nature of the position. It's not going to be ranked high. It doesn't get drafted often very high. So I think that's probably it, and it's fine. Like if he doesn't end up top 10 in the country, it's fine. He's a really good prospect, really, really good prospect. Yeah. So excited to see that. And then from there, in-state recruiting, man, like it's a big deal, especially in the western part of the state. Penn State is pretty well on fire out there, and they're getting a lot of the guys that they want. And for a guy to, if we're going to play NCAA 25, for a guy that basically jumps on board as soon as you offer and he's this good, that is pretty cool. Like that is saying something about Terry Smith, saying something about Jay Sider, saying something about James Franklin, Western Pennsylvania. So multiple layers there, that everything is really good for Penn State in that running back realm. So long time till signing day. Ryan, you spoke to him. I spoke to him a little bit when he committed. Doesn't seem to be much of a flight risk. He's not far down the road, but we spent a lot of time on a 2027 commit. So I'm starting to get a little bit rambly here. So move on to the next one. Well, but I mean, it's tough to say anything but great work early for the Penn State staff.
And something that Ryan wrote over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you can read the full article where he breaks down all this information, because we're not getting to all of it today. We understand 2027 is a ways away, and we're going to talk about what happens next weekend coming up next. But code PSU1, 2 months for $1. A bunch of people joining the show here in the last couple of minutes. So if you missed that earlier, you get inside access to all of our premium content for just $1, 2 months. We're pushing into at the end of October. So you're getting a good chunk of the Penn State football season, recruiting, all that stuff for just $1. But Ryan, you mentioned Penn State has the opportunity to do something they haven't done in a little bit, which is kind of go on a quarterback run. Troy Hune in 2026, but then Peter Bork is another player in the current class that we're talking about who is interested in the Nittany Lions, has been around. So can you tell us a little bit more about this particular situation?
Yeah, Penn State's landed top 10 quarterbacks before, obviously Gronk and Aller, but they've never really done it back-to-back. And this sets up to maybe be an opportunity for them to do that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself there, because first off, let's start with the fact that Troy Hune has to stay in the top 10, and he's kind of a bubble guy there at the moment as it is. But Peter Bork, Sean, I mean, I feel like Bork's Sean's guy. Sean's been really high on Bork all summer, and obviously we got to watch him at the whiteout camp, and I believe a camp before that too. I thought he camped twice, and the stuff that just kind of stood out to me is his ability to throw on the run. I mean, that's especially at whiteout camp, watching some of his rollouts to the right and sidearming it like Aller and stuff. I mean, there's a lot to like here for a junior, or excuse me, for a rising sophomore. Not to mention also 6'4", 195, already pretty good build. And oh, by the way, he runs a pretty good 40 down in the 4.7-ish range. So
yeah, he's athletic.
Yeah. So there's the size there and the arm, obviously, but there's some sneaky athleticism that I didn't really realize until we got to really kind of see him up close. But Sean, real quick, I'll throw it to you on Bork, just because I feel like that's a guy that you've been just high on, or realize his potential maybe a little sooner than me.
Yeah, we talked about him after the Elite 11, and that was a good group of 2025s in there. And he was, I mean, in a different group, because they put the underclassmen in a different group, but he was one that stood out among the underclassmen. Then he came back to camp, threw the ball really well, as you mentioned, tested well. And then the whiteout camp is really when you kind of saw him step up. Now, he was one of 2 quarterbacks that were there. We also had a junior college guy there. So it's tough to compare among his peers when there's only 2 of them, and he was by far the better one. But man, he was slinging it around. He really reminds me of Gronk.
Yes.
Like
glad
that,
you said that.
he's taller, but a lot of the things that they like to do or that he likes to do kind of match up with what Grunk did in Ohio. So very excited to watch him continue to grow. He's playing for Jeff Moore at Tabor Academy, so he's going to be used right. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go. Brady Edmonds, probably the number one guy for Penn State right now in 2027. He came in and camped and worked with Danny O'Brien, worked with some of those guys, but I don't think there's a ton of separation, not enough separation to if Bork calls him up and says he wants to come, not enough separation to turn him down. So this is an ongoing evaluation, as it always is. They're still evaluating 2025 quarterbacks, so it's going to be a long time before we talk about the juice of this recruitment. But I think Penn State's done a nice job getting him on campus early. He's been to a couple other schools, but you look at that being right in that wheelhouse. And if Danny O'Brien's around and when the class of 2027 signs, then I think Penn State's got a real shot here.
Real quick, T. Frank. If Penn State signs back-to-back California kids, California quarterbacks, I'm retiring, because everything I thought I knew about Penn State recruiting now clearly is just out the window.
And you're referencing Brady Edmonds right now.
Brady Edmonds, obviously out of California. So we'll see where
everybody
things go.
Everybody has him top 2 on their board.
He's been all over the place too. Yeah. So I obviously great to get him on campus for Penn State, but he's been to a ton of elite programs already.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
I was just going to chime in one last thing, because I wanted to agree with Fitz, but I wanted to point out some of the things that you notice on film from Peter Bork. Specifically, what reminds me of Grunk in these situations is foot quickness. I just want to put these highlights up here. His ability to get through his footwork really quick and the release. So one of the things that Ethan Grunkmeyer, you're going to see eventually at Penn State, is how quick his decisions are, but how quick his process of throwing the football is. Strong arm, quick release, quick feet. That is a really good fit for Andy Kolnicki's offense with their RPOs and read options. So I just wanted to say this is a guy who not only is a good football player, but I think fits really well into what they're building at Penn State.
Awesome. Hey, last thing, I got to mention Maxwell Hiller, number 23 in the country, offensive tackle out of Coatesville. Penn State's done a really good job at offensive line recruiting, especially in the region lately. Of course, Owen Alcini's only a 4-star, who I think is one of the more underrated guys that they've got in a long time. But of course, you got Javen Williams, you got Cooper Cousins, you got Kevin Brown. 3 guys who, 2 of them were 5 stars. And Kevin Brown is a guy I think can be a 5-star. Well, here's another one in Coatesville who could potentially be a 5-star. And Hiller was, one of the most impressive offensive linemen we got to watch. So he's at number 23. And then also just want to mention quick, Larry Moon. He's down a little bit further in the 90s. A guy out of Pittsburgh area. He was at Central Catholic last year. Now he's going to play for his hometown school in Aliquippa. Incredibly high on Penn State's board. So you got Larry Moon, you got Hiller. They already got Keemon Spell on there as far as 3 really good Pennsylvania recruits who they're off to a great start with. Let's see where things go. We've already spent too much time on 2027, but I couldn't get through this without mentioning those 2, because they are going to be guys that we talk about a lot.
But Fitz, you want to talk about Sean Lee Jr.? I apologize, I can't find the question in the chat.
Yeah, it's up. So the Harrisburg quarterback question. So someone was asking about the ruling. Sean Lee Jr. Sean Lee, that played for Penn State, played safety for Penn State in the mid-90s. His son Shawnee is a quarterback at Harrisburg High. Is committed to Pitt. Going to be a defensive back there. Really good athlete, kind of the cog that makes that one go. 3 straight District 3 championships. He was denied what would be his final year of eligibility yesterday by the PIAA. There you got the question on the screen. So this is his 5th year. 2020 counted for high school athletes, non-athletes, whatever. He took online classes. They thought that because of that, he was clear to play this year, played 2021, 2022, 2023. So adding 2020 makes it 4 years. PIAA ruled against him. He's not going to play this year. Letter of the law, probably right, because that would be his 5th year of high school. Of course, with COVID, everything is murky in terms of eligibility, but he's not going to play for Harrisburg this year. Be interesting to see which direction they go. I think they've got a sophomore quarterback that's pretty good. But of course, they're going to rely heavily on the run game. I guess that's the best way I can say that, with Messiah Mickens, a couple other guys, DeAndre Sheffy's there. And then of course they've got their stud back coming from last year. So there's a lot of running going on in Harrisburg right now, but that's the gist of the situation. Unfortunately for Shawnee, he's not going to get to play high school this year. We'll see if he ends up at a prep school or something like that before he ends up at Pitt, where he's going to play defensive back. So a tough one for the kid, but probably the right ruling in terms of the technicality of the lawyer stuff. So that's kind of to get you caught up there. I appreciate you asking the question.
Yeah, the NCAA and PIAA are not the same thing as far as granting extra years of eligibility. So I think I'll tell you what, man, I think it's going to really impact Harrisburg's chances of winning a state championship this year, or at least getting that far. I mean, yes, they have a decent player who can come up through there. We got to watch him at 7-on-7, but having that experience, Lee ran for like 1,500 yards last year, something like that too. I mean, really good athlete that they were counting on having there. So it'll be interesting. They play LaSalle and Joey O'Brien on Saturday. I will definitely be at that one, and very curious to see how they're able to rally that offense. And LaSalle's a good team too, so they're going to be tested right away. Of course, then they have McDevitt the next week.
And that is a perfect transition into Ryan's games he wants to watch here to start the season. So, Ryan, you're going to be at that game. So lead us off with more details on that Harrisburg game, and then we can kind of get into the other games and the other prospects as we get throughout this next segment.
Yeah, Saturday at 1 p.m. If you're in the area, would definitely recommend it. I think also if you're in the area, you'll probably already have that McDevitt game circled next week. But also if you're a Penn State fan, that game is at the exact same time as West Virginia. So that's going to be a little bit of a conflict, which is also why I will be attending this one, and probably not the McDevitt game, but we'll talk about that next week. Anyway, obviously Elias Koch in the mix there as a player to keep an eye on, and Joey O'Brien as well. Of course, Harrisburg is home to Mickens and Kevin Brown. I think fans are already pretty well aware of that. Gavin Sidwar, too, committed to Rutgers, quarterback for LaSalle. So you got good 5-6 Division I prospects in that game. And I think Joey O'Brien's the one to really circle. Obviously, Koch, too. I mean, both of them are guys that Penn State's going to keep an eye on and recruit over the next couple of months, or really over the next year. Let's see how they develop, of course. But Joey O'Brien's a really important safety that I don't know we've talked about a ton, but he's got that length that Dex loves, and most think he's kind of leaning towards Notre Dame right now. We'll see where things go with that. But
is he the next Kyle Hamilton? I know they got 4 of them there now, so, and they just got Jaden Blair. So
it's not a bad comparison, and not a bad place to go to if you're a guy like Joey O'Brien. So I get it. But real quick, I want to roll through some of these. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but if you want to stay up late night tonight, Mater Dei versus Centennial. Of course, Mater Dei's home to Darius Dixon, so we're going to get a good look at one of Penn State's cornerback commits. This game is absolutely stacked with Division I talent. I mean, it's insane. I think there's 20 guys committed to FBS or Power 4 schools already. Obviously, Penn State doesn't do a ton of recruiting out in California, but we're going to get to watch Darius Dixon go up against Tavion McNair, who's a really good wide receiver committed to Utah. And if he plays, Texas A&M commit Houston Longstreet is a 5-star quarterback that should test Dixon and Mater Dei's defense a little bit. So if you want to stay up late night, that game starts at 10 p.m. Eastern time. I'm trying to find a stream for it. I know it's on NFHS if any of you guys pay for that, which I will probably be keeping an eye on that tonight. But whether I can stay up till 12:30 till the end, I don't know about all that. We'll see.
Yeah, find me a link. I'll watch it tomorrow.
Yeah, that makes NFHS, which is probably what I'll do at 6 a.m. Wake up and just recap it then. Just keep rolling through some real quick. Miami Central versus Lakeland. Of course, Miami Central has 2 Penn State commits this year, and Beckham Kritza, quarterback, Randy Adarica as well. So that's a fun one to watch. Look, this is Kritza's moment, right? We've kind of talked about this, I think, a little bit over the past month, but just being able to see him play against the kind of competition he's going to play against is really, I think, one of the main things I'm going to watch all season. He's got Nashawn Montgomery, who's going to, I think, end up probably at Florida. He's got Kaylee, I think it's Kaylee Sterling, I believe it is. I know he's committed to Pitt. I think it's Kaylee Sterling. Sean Thompson as well. So he's got 3 really good receivers who are going to play at the highest level of college football around him. He's also going to go against Keon Young, one of the best safety prospects out there, committed to Ole Miss. Jermichael Gillis is going to USF. Malik Morris is a stud linebacker. All those guys, of course, are at Lakeland. So he's going to be going up against some really good talent tomorrow night. That's another one I'm still trying to find a stream for. Let's also mention 2 more real quick. Central Catholic is taking on St. Francis. Boy, that's an interesting one. It's at 3 o'clock on Saturday. St. Francis is loaded with talent, but they also went 5-6 last year. They also have Zion Ellie now. They got a lot of talent there. So just being able to see how Colson Gatton and, of course, Xavier Thomas, who's committed to Penn State, watching them against some really good Division I prospects. I think if you're out in Pittsburgh, that's absolutely a game you should attend, because there is going to be no shortage of D1 guys out there. And then last one real quick, this one we're all going to be able to watch. St. John Bosco against Chaminade-Madonna. There we go.
Yeah.
Chaminade-Madonna. Chaminade-Madonna. If you were on last week's show, you'd understand that was a fun name we talked about. But that's, of course, Kobe Howard taking a massive, massive step up in competition this year. Man, he's got a lot of good receivers around him, too. Digging into this game, I didn't realize, I knew Jabari Brady was there. He's a top 100 2026 guy. But, Denarius Gray's also there, Auburn commit. So he's got 3 or 4 other really good receivers on his team. So just kind of seeing, where does he kind of stack up in that rotation, receptions, all that kind of stuff. Very curious to see how that goes. And St. John Bosco, I think they were declared the national champions a year or 2 ago out of California. They've got a ton of talent. And that's certainly a game that if you're hanging out at the house on Saturday night, be sure to put on ESPN2.
Fitz, I know we talked about this a little bit last week of players you're interested in watching, but is there in those specific games or any of those players that Ryan mentioned, anyone that you're going to be keying on specifically that you want to see for sure and you want to get a fresh evaluation on after a summer of work from these guys?
Kobe Howard, number one. I think that's the big one. You look at what all the roller coaster of this offseason for him in Penn State. That one is certainly fresh in my eyes. And of course, everybody follows Penn State's going to be jumping at receivers. So go with that one. Beckham Kritza seems to start out in his scrimmage or unofficial game or whatever it was called last week. He threw the ball well, threw the deep ball well. Again, I think it's in there. We'll continue to see if it comes out. And I'm very interested in see that. Ryan mentioned at Modern Day, Darius Dixon, and this is an interesting one to me. So Rivals has him 65 overall. ESPN has him 90 overall. 24/7 has him 113 overall. We have him as an 89 3-star. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, what's the tape say? What does he do this? And it's tough to do that. I mean, they're playing Centennial, but it's tough to do that for a corner to make that evaluation at a high school level, especially because we didn't see him at camp. But why are we the outlier there? Why is this an interesting difference here? So I'm from an evaluation standpoint, Darius Dixon's an interesting one to me because it seems like Penn State's pretty high on him. They've recruited corners extremely well. They brought a kid from all the way across the country and got him to commit over that weekend. There's a lot of things going Penn State's way here, and it's just kind of I wonder what are we seeing that everyone else isn't, or what is everyone else seeing that we aren't? So yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, and in addition to playing in the toughest high school division out there, Modern Day's 2 non-conference games are Bishop Gorman and St. Francis. So he's going to have, every week he's going up against somebody great. And, you would think that from a film perspective, you're going to learn a lot from that. Maybe almost too much sometimes, right? Because if you see guys making mistakes, but they're playing against the elite of the elite, how do you balance that compared to, maybe guys in Central PA who aren't playing against nearly that kind of competition, but are always making awesome plays. So that's why I do not even dabble in the rankings world. That's all you, Charles. Have fun with it.
Yep.
I've watched some of his film last year for his commitment, and the way they used him was interesting, where he was a slot corner a lot of times, but it wasn't necessarily it was more matchup based of, it seemed like he was taking the big physical guy, or another way you could say that is he always had the slowest receiver out there, as opposed to some of the other guys who came on the field and took the outside receivers. And then, of course, we talked about using him in off coverage, and he almost has safety-like tendencies at times. I'll be interested to see, like Fitz said, how they use him, what the tape shows, and against a lot of good quarterbacks, you can't hide. So there's going to be a lot to learn from that. I think you both nailed it in terms of guys you want to see and things we want to learn about the class of 2025. Next, we have your ask around for, I think this was the last one you did. I thought this was a really great one. Penn State's best evaluations in 2025, a class that everyone kind of talks down. If we're being honest about the way that Penn State fans, and generally this conversation has gone around the class of 2025, it's that this is not a class filled with stars and kind of meeting the expectation of the other classes previous. Yet, there are some really good evaluations in this class, and you both picked a favorite and explained why. So if it's come back to you, who was your pick of best evaluation in your mind for the class of 2025?
So when you talk best evaluation, you're not necessarily talking best player. You're talking about how did you find this guy? Why did you find this guy? When did you find this guy? And how do you think it's gone since then? Because we saw some early evaluation. I mean, Penn State's first 4 commits in the 2025 are now gone. And I would say 2.5 of those to 3 of those, nobody's worried about it. That's my way of saying that they're okay without those guys. When you go look back last fall, I mean, Greater Latrobe on nobody's radar. Like it's a school in Western Pennsylvania that doesn't churn out prospects, but in October, Penn State offered Alex Tash, and they were one of the first offers to get there. I think, and I look at some of the other schools that recruit and evaluate pretty well. Marshall's one of them. He had offers from UConn and Marshall this time last summer. Like, that's pretty interesting to me. Charles Huff's done a heck of a job, actually, just talking to Brian Doan about that a little bit, but they know what they're looking at down there. So that's a good sign. And then Penn State looked at his tape. They didn't have numbers on him, which they don't often move on that, but they felt good enough about him to go. And they're glad they did, because they got numbers on him this summer. They were really, really good. So I'm very curious to see how he goes when he's full bore healthy. He's not put on a ton of weight, which is a good thing, because I think he was up to 225 at some point. Now he's probably about
big.
215. So he's trimmed down a bit, and I think they're going to be pretty good this year, that team. So it's going to be fun to watch them come together. I know they've got another linebacker that's not as high in terms of the rankings, but he's a good player as well. John Wetzel committed to Marshall. So I think that's something worth watching there. But I think Penn State did a really good job, and I know. It seemed like a bit of a layup at the time because he didn't have a huge offer list or anything like that. I know Notre Dame came on with an offer shortly before he committed, but that's not necessarily what we're looking at in terms of valuation. This is a guy that's continued to go up, and I know we have him extremely high on 3, but everybody else seems to be catching up and going in that direction. So in a class where we haven't seen kind of what we're used to in guys that just continue to climb after they commit. Tash is one of those guys. So I think it's been a really good evaluation. Whether it was Manny, whether it was the rest of the staff, I think it's a really good evaluation. I know Tom Allen's pretty happy to have Alex Tash.
Yeah, and the way he runs and moves in space, I don't think he's the fastest guy in the world, but he moves really well, and he does have a good closing burst. Ryan, any thoughts? I know you are one of our experts on the Western State recruiting as well, in terms of the teams you cover over the Monty Christian stuff. I feel like you were very early on that stuff. So just your thoughts on this particular situation with getting Alex Tash and how the linebacker room played out after that. And how he's been kind of a centrifuge that you feel comfortable with, and all the other things that have happened around it in the class of 2025.
Sean's gonna be mad at me for this, but I'm gonna call him Dan Connor Jr. Ooh. Am I going a little too far? Maybe a little too far with that. Okay.
I mean,
I love him.
Wasn't Specca Dan Connor Jr. last year? So it's like the Kyle Hamilton thing at Notre Dame.
Okay. I guess.
Reproducing
Fair.
Dan Connors here, which actually would be a pretty good strategy. But
Alex,
right.
Alex has a little bit more size, like just build wise, he fits that a little bit more than Specca. But hey, by the way, real quick, Andy, his younger brother, picked up a West Virginia offer, 2026 guy. We'll see. Safety prospect. We'll see where things go. But no, Alex Tash is a great player. I hope his shoulder holds up. That's the big thing I'll be watching for this year. Right. Linebacker, shoulders, not an injury that you want if you're a linebacker. So he got his shoulder fixed. Obviously, let's hope it all holds up this year and he's able to progress and that's not a reoccurring injury, but I've seen quite a few times where it can be, especially at such a physical position. So that's really what I'll be watching for, because I have no doubts about athletically and how he's able to read the field and all that he'll be just fine down the road. As far as my pick, Matt Henderson, tight end, is where I went with that. This is pretty similar, I think, to Tash's situation, where he wasn't even ranked when Penn State offered him. He had Michigan State offer, but everything else was non-Power 5. Penn State offers on April 25th, and sure enough, Maryland, Pitt, Virginia Tech, boom, 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 all offer within the coming days, which I think we've seen that story so many times, especially at the tight end position. Obviously, schools recognize that Penn State has a really good eye for that stuff, but runs a 4.6, had a 31-foot broad. I mean, this is a guy who's 6'5", 210. I mean, there's a lot of size there and some really good athletic numbers that I think Penn State's going to try and take advantage of over the coming years. But I mean, it's a little similar to Luke Reynolds. He's not going to end up on the Luke Reynolds, as high as Luke ended up being. But there's also a reason why On3 does have him as part of their On 300, where I don't think any of the other 3 sites do. So he mainly played receiver last year. I think he'll probably be still playing quite a bit receiver this year as well. But from I don't want to say a smaller school in Powhatan, because they actually play some good competition. It's a smaller school as far as enrollment, but they play like the Manchesters and the LC Birds and some really good schools down in that way. So we're going to see him go up against a handful of guys that'll play at least one AA or some of them will play FBS level. And, just watching his progression this year. But give Ty Howell a lot of credit for that. He came up early, noticed his potential at camp. I believe it was as a sophomore, I want to say, Sean. And then just kind of kept chipping away at that recruitment, kept an eye on him. And sure enough, once he was able to see him during the spring eval, which is actually the contact period now, but I still will call it the spring eval period, he made a very quick move to offer. And, now I think he's probably one of the more high floor prospects in this class, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. He's a guy that catches you off.
Yeah.
He catches you off guard with how big he is, because I don't know what it is, but he doesn't look necessarily 6'5". He doesn't look necessarily as big as he is, and then you see him in person and he's huge. Like, he's as every big as the other tight ends that they've recruited recently. Again, the context here of getting Matt Henderson, finding that player, knowing that Penn State was in with a lot of the top tight ends and it didn't really go their way with some of those national prospects, but to have Matt Henderson in the back pocket, how important is that, Fitz, to keep a strength on your roster like that?
Yeah, I mean, no one's too worried about it. Like, they think that Henderson can fit in that room, and that's a high bar to fit in there. So that's the direction you go with it. Obviously, Andrew Olish, you want to keep him home if you're Penn State, and that did not work out in that situation. Beyond that, there's not much to say. But Penn State's happy with Henderson. They think he can blossom into a guy that can be one of those guys. And by the way, Ryan, you misspoke. You said Luke Reynolds earlier. It's touchdown king Luke Reynolds from camp. So
yes.
Should have read that story last night when it popped on my feed.
I guess so. Greg's all over it as usual. But no, I mean, it's hey, give them benefit of the doubt when it comes to tight ends. You're not going to hit them all, but they've hit quite a bit.
Last thing here for today is to take a look at Marcus Hagans and his work so far in the class of 2026, which we've highlighted here on the show. Has been pretty exceptional so far to find and get recruits from some pretty electric players, LeVar Keys and Jasir Rogers. But Fitz did an inside lash where he was previewing. Ryan. Okay.
Wrong person.
Trimmings. My bad.
Yep.
Off the cuff here. That's what happens when you don't have it written down. Your Trimmings article lately was about the receiver commits in 2026. They've already got 2. They're way ahead. What happens with that? Maybe 1 or 2 more spots. So you highlighted some players. As always, go read it. But who are some of the guys you want to bring up here on the show?
Are you talking to me or Sean? Because you got it wrong again. Anyway, I wrote the story, T. Frank. I love you, buddy.
You wrote the story? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I thought it was Fitz.
Let's throw. I kind of stole the story from Sean on Monday because I needed something to do, and a lot of it was corroborated info. But Sean did a good job helping me with that. We'll leave it at that. But look, I think it's there's a couple things to highlight. One, Virginia, Davion Brown in the Richmond area, Connor Salmon, who is at he's at Woodgrove, isn't that closer to DC? I believe it is. Purcellville, I believe it is. And then Travis Johnson, who's down in the Tidewater area. All 3 are really good-looking receiver prospects. All 3 will be, certainly 4-star prospects. They already are, but should stay that high. And Penn State would love to get in the mix with them. I would have Davion Brown as their top guy at the moment, who's actually the only one I really haven't seen in person too. So I need to kind of dig a little bit, watch some of his film a little bit more. But he's kind of the consensus. If you look at all the 4 sites, the highest ranked guy, I think we have him at 74 in the industry ranking. So let's keep an eye on him. He already said that Penn. Go ahead.
Does he get an athlete tag too? Because I watching some of these highlights, I can imagine that the defense might have something to say about wanting to have him play on that side of the ball. Or is he purely a wide receiver commit?
Everything I've heard is wide receiver, right, Sean? Have you heard anything else?
Yeah, I've heard wide receiver. It's pretty much exclusively.
Okay. Yeah. But Auburn, Tennessee, USC, Virginia Tech are the 4 schools, including Penn State, excuse me. He was asked, I don't know, a couple weeks ago if, who were the ones standing out, and it was those 4 in Penn State. So let's see where things progress there. Connor Salmon really kind of stood out, I thought, at camp. He was one of the better receivers we got to see at camp, especially that second one at the whiteout camp. Runs really well. I mean, we knew he already ran well from his track numbers, but consistently was able to put up some really good shuttles and broads and all that stuff too. So he's not just a speedster, but has that explosion and all that too. And then Travis Johnson, look, he's 6'2", 175, so he's got to add weight. But, as far as like route running and those things go, I thought he was one of the more impressive guys at the Baltimore Under Armour camp back
Great
in
stride
May.
too.
So
Like
that's
I
kind
like
of
the way he
too.
runs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing. Sean, I'll throw it to you if you want to hit on any of the other kind of guys that we highlighted in this. But to me, Marcus Higgins, we think Marcus Higgins, we think Virginia, right? He should have strong ties in Virginia. He absolutely does, from what we understand. Well, now you got an opportunity with 3 really good wide receivers who have visited consistently. Yeah, I feel like it's going to be pretty important for him to get at least one of them, maybe even 2.
Yeah, and T. Frank was asking us before the show. He came to us. He's like, "You guys know what you're talking about. Is Marcus Higgins having too much success in 2026?" And I was like, "Well, let's tap the brakes here, buddy." But no, I mean, you've got numbers out there, which is what you do. You throw the net out and see if it works. It just happens to be that net is in Virginia. He's got some ties there. It's interesting. You've got also Mark Dupuis has ties in Virginia. He spent a couple years with Ricky at Old Dominion.
Yep.
So you've got the ability to sort of flesh that out. I mean, it's not just on one guy anymore. Like you talk about how the staff expansion, the rules that go with that. Now you've got that with recruiting too. And these analysts were recruiting before. Dan Connor was a guy with Anthony Specca. You've seen some, Danny O'Brien, who has bounced back to actual analyst, quarterback coach, whatever you want to call him now. He's been successful recruiting. So it can happen. You spread that out. So you've got those guys. You got Messiah Hampton up in New York. He's been to campus a couple of times. Elias Koch, down in Harrisburg. He's a guy that, even though he might not be the physical freak that some of these other guys like Connor Salmon was absolutely off the charts, but Elias, really good football player. So it's going to be interesting to see what the numbers look like in 2026, especially with the expanded scholarships. And, how do you fix that room? Well, you continue to go until you find the right combinations, the right guys. And I think it's going to be fun to watch. And I hate to say that because of 2025, not so fun, but
Yeah.
I think they're doing okay. And you know what? We've seen guys push through the early struggles before. We've seen it with Phil Troutwine. I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison, but like once you got past some of those tougher classes up front, you remember the Tangwall class that had Wyatt Millum, Tristan Lee, Nolan Rucci, once he got past that and found his own relationships with his own guys, turned out pretty well. So not saying that's going to happen with Higgins, but there's, a good start in 2026 with Keys, and especially just Sear Rogers, man. That guy's going to continue to blow up mostly from a rankings perspective, because he seems pretty well set with Penn State. But like that's, there's encouraging signs in 2026. We're going to see which direction it goes. The offense is going to be under the microscope for more than those 2025 prospects this year. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
That last note there, Fitz. The offense should produce fun play for receivers. I think that this can be a receiver-friendly offense based on what I've seen on film and based on some of the numbers. I wrote about this over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where they want to get the ball to those receivers in an aggressive way. So if you put up a fun offense, receivers do take notice of that. Ryan, you were going to say something.
And you're throwing darts at receivers. I mean, that's how it is. Like if you want to take 4 or 5, you're going to hit 2, hopefully 3, and that's not always the case, as we've seen in, you go back to that 2022 class. So you're throwing darts, and it's, as somebody mentioned in the chat, a high bust rate. And the best way to go about that is to take the guys that you think can push through that and hope that the numbers work themselves out.
Yeah, just last thing. I just want to say, like, from working on this, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is Coke is higher on their board than I thought originally. I want to make that clear because we talked about that a good little bit on this podcast the last couple of weeks. He's certainly a guy that they're going to be recruiting, and that was kind of honestly our discussion on this podcast is kind of part of the reason this all came together, because we felt like we really kind of keep digging on some of this. And then the other thing too is Messiah Hampton up in Rochester, New York, not a hotbed for recruiting. He's another guy that I thought was maybe in that next tier of guys they're going to keep an eye on. We'll see where things go. No, he's firmly somebody they really want. So he camped at Michigan and Ohio State this year, left both of those camps with offers. If you look at his ratings right now, 88, 87, kind of like a mid-range 3-star. I think there's a lot of potential for him to maybe move up in the rankings down the road. We'll see how he progresses. So keep an eye on Messiah Hampton, because I don't think he's a guy I've talked about enough, and that will probably be changing here in the coming months.
Fitz, looked like you were going to say something there. You want to wrap us up on the show today?
Not really. I agree with Ryan very, very clearly, and it goes without saying, but we have to say it. 2026 is very early. Like, these evaluations are going to continue. There are guys who are going to fall off. There are guys who are going to jump on the board. Junior film of paramount importance to 2026 prospects this year. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But we're going to see how this whole train comes along. It's going to be something that's going to have ups and downs, and we'll see if the 2026 class isn't up, and we're going to see if they can come back around on any of those 2025s, because they're trying to fix it. I'll tell you that they're trying to fix it, and that's where they want to be.
Follow along at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And, of course, you can check out the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel here. It's game week. By the next time you see us live on this channel, Penn State and West Virginia will be on the train tracks towards a collision. Monday, James Franklin's press conference happens at noon. At about 5 minutes after its conclusion, we have a live replay here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. I encourage you to check it out. It's the #1 place you can find James Franklin's comments on YouTube, or anywhere in the world, honestly, as I'm going to start phrasing everything that way. And, of course, our live shows next week, getting you ready for Penn State versus West Virginia. We've got a tailgate show 90 minutes before kickoff. We've got a post-game show immediately after the conclusion of the game. Your place for Penn State football here on Blue White Illustrated's YouTube channel. Your place for that. And, of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Guys, thank you so much. We'll be back next week with Penn State football, baby.